We live in a world obsessed with doing, with filling every hour, every slot, every corner of our lives with more tasks, more goals, more movement. Productivity has become a religion, and busy has become the badge. You wake up already behind. You chase deadlines like they're oxygen. You say yes before you even breathe. And in all that running, all that chasing, you forget something critical. Not everything that fills your day fuels your life. You don't need to do more. You need to do what matters. Because the truth is, most of what you're doing is distraction dressed as discipline. Most of what's filling your time is draining your soul. You're grinding for approval, hustling for validation, saying yes to things that don't even align with your values, and the world will applaud you for it. Look how busy they are, they'll say. Look how hard they work. But let me ask you, are you building your purpose, or are you just building noise? Are you moving forward or just moving around? Because motion and meaning are not the same thing. Action without intention is exhaustion. Progress without purpose is empty. You were not put here to scatter your energy like confetti across every meaningless obligation. You were born to focus, to narrow in, to strip away what doesn't serve and go deep into what does. You were born to prioritize, not just your time, but your soul. And that starts with saying no. Saying no to the things that look good on paper but feel hollow inside. Saying no to people who drain you, roles that define you by how much you produce, schedules that squeeze the life out of you. Because every time you say yes to what doesn't matter, you're saying no to what does. Your energy is not infinite, your focus is not disposable, and your life is too sacred to be lived in fragments. The world will tell you to do it all, but the wise learn to do what matters most. They cut through the noise, they protect their peace, they guard their time like treasure, because it is. Time is not just money, it's direction, it's power, it's the difference between a full calendar and a fulfilled life. So stop trying to win at being busy, start winning at being intentional. You don't need more apps, more planners, more color-coded to-do lists. You need clarity. What matters? What truly matters to you? Strip away the shoulds. Forget what looks impressive. What makes you feel alive? What are you building that will outlive applause? Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you've done. It's about what you've done that mattered. What will you remember? What will they remember about you? The truth is, no one talks about how fast you replied to emails. No one writes eulogies about how many meetings you made. They talk about your presence, your depth, your ability to focus on what mattered in a world constantly pulling you toward what didn't. So pause, reflect, ask yourself honestly, what am I doing that's keeping me busy but keeping me empty? What am I carrying that's not even mine to hold? What am I building that has no foundation in meaning? Because if you don't ask those questions now, life will force them on you later. And by then, you'll realize the price of distraction is not just stress, it's regret. You will regret the days you were everywhere but never really here. You will regret the projects that impressed others but buried your soul. You will regret the noise you chose over your own voice, but it's not too late. It never is. You can choose again. You can cut the excess. You can stop performing productivity and start living with purpose. And when you do, you'll find something wild. You actually get more done when you do less, but do it with meaning. Your energy returns. Your creativity ignites. Your mind clears. Because when you stop splitting yourself into 1,000 meaningless pieces, you finally bring your full self into the things that matter. And that changes everything. You don't need to be everywhere. You need to be here. You don't need to do everything. You need to do the right thing. And the right thing often isn't more. It's deeper, simpler, truer. You're not behind. You're just distracted. You're not lazy. You're just misaligned. And once you realign, once you get clear on your why, your what, your who, everything shifts. Suddenly you're not tired from doing too much. You're fueled by doing what's right. That's not just productivity. That's purpose. That's power. That's peace. You think your value is in your volume, that if you just do more, say yes more, stay later, wake up earlier, somehow you'll finally feel worthy. But here's the trap. Worthiness doesn't come from output. It doesn't come from the number of tasks you complete or the hours you grind. It comes from alignment. And alignment starts when you slow down long enough to ask yourself the questions you've been avoiding. Why am I doing all of this? Who am I trying to prove something to? What am I really chasing? Because if you don't face those questions, you'll keep running in circles, faster, louder, emptier. You'll keep measuring progress by how exhausted you are. You'll confuse burnout for success. You'll wear your busyness like a badge and wonder why your soul feels bankrupt. But you can't build a meaningful life on meaningless actions. You can't fill the void with more motion. The world doesn't need you to do everything. It needs you to do what's real, what's deep, what's rooted in purpose. And that requires courage. The courage to stop, to say no, to let go of what looks productive but leads nowhere. Because real power isn't in how many things you can juggle. It's in how ruthlessly you protect what matters. It's in your ability to turn down the noise and turn up the truth. But truth is uncomfortable. It asks you to let go of the illusion that more is always better. It asks you to sit with silence, to choose depth over applause, to disappoint others in order to stay loyal to yourself. That's not easy, especially in a world that praises the hustle and shames stillness. But stillness isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's strength. It's choosing quality over chaos. It's choosing meaning over momentum. You weren't made to multitask your way through life. You weren't designed to split your attention into fragments and call it focus. You were made to go deep, to pour your energy into the few things that actually matter, the work that lights your fire, the relationships that feed your soul, the habits that keep you grounded, the purpose that pulls you forward. Everything else is noise. Everything else is weight. And if you want to rise, you have to let it go. You have to stop glorifying exhaustion. Stop measuring your days by how much you did and start asking, did I do what mattered? Did I move with intention? Did I honor my energy? Did I show up where my soul actually wants to be? Because if the answer is no, then doing more won't save you. It'll bury you. It'll drown you in a life full of tasks but void of truth. You'll be praised for your hustle, but quietly haunted by the feeling that something's missing. And that something isn't more, it's meaning. You don't need a longer to-do list. You need a clearer purpose. You don't need more hours. You need better boundaries. You don't need to work harder. You need to focus deeper. Because when your energy is scattered, your impact is diluted. But when your energy is focused, your presence becomes undeniable. You walk into a room and people feel it, not because you're doing everything, but because you're fully present in the few things that matter. That's power. That's clarity. That's the life most people never touch, because they're too busy trying to be everywhere at once. But not you. You're done performing, done proving, done running. Now you choose. You pause. You prune. You realign. And in that decision, you reclaim your life, not as a blur of activity, but as a deliberate masterpiece, painted with presence, built with boundaries, lived with soul. Most people don't burn out because they're doing too much. They burn out because they're doing too many things that don't matter, meetings that lead nowhere, conversations that drain their energy, tasks that tick a box but don't move the needle. And in the middle of it all, they forget. Forget why they started. Forget what actually lights them up. Forget what they're really here to do. That's what happens when you're constantly in motion, but rarely in alignment. You wake up one day realizing you've climbed the wrong ladder. You've spent years perfecting the art of being efficient without ever asking if what you're doing is even meaningful. That's the crisis of the modern world. We're efficient at the wrong things. We're productive in the wrong direction. We're sprinting, but where? Toward what? At what cost? Doing more is not the flex. Doing what matters most. That's the revolution. Because doing what matters means you have to choose, and choosing means you have to cut. You have to let go of being everything to everyone. You have to stop chasing approval from people who don't even know who they are. You have to tune out the noise and tune into your gut. And that's hard, because deep down, you still think your worth is tied to how many people say you're amazing. You still believe that busyness equals value, that filling your calendar somehow fills your soul. But the truth is, it doesn't. It never did. And the moment you stop chasing that illusion, you reclaim something most people never find: peace. Peace that comes from clarity. Peace that comes from simplicity. Peace that comes when your actions and your values are finally in sync. You don't get there by doing more. You get there by doing less, on purpose. It's about subtraction. It's about refinement. You remove the non-essential, so what remains is undeniable. You start asking different questions. Not what more can I do, but what matters so much that everything else becomes noise. Not how can I fit everything in, but what would happen if I only focused on the few things that matter. That's not laziness, that's mastery. Because a focused life is not an easy life, but it's a free one. Free from comparison, free from guilt, free from the need to constantly perform. You're no longer addicted to urgency. You don't jump at every notification. You don't panic when someone says, "I need this now," because you're not running on their chaos anymore. You're running on your own clarity, and the clearer you become, the more magnetic you get. People start asking, "How do you stay so calm? How do you always seem to know what to do?" It's not magic. It's discipline. It's focus. It's the decision to live a life that's deep, not wide. A life that's designed, not defaulted. You no longer wake up and react. You create, you align, you choose your inputs. You protect your time like it's sacred, because it is. And slowly, your days start to feel different. Less cluttered, less rushed, more grounded, more alive. Because now you're not just living, you're living on purpose. That's what happens when you stop trying to do more and start doing what actually matters. You stop existing in survival mode. You stop confusing movement for meaning. You stop apologizing for not being everything and start owning the few things you were born to master. That's not selfish, that's sacred. That's the kind of life that speaks without shouting, the kind of life that moves mountains with stillness, the kind of life that others feel just by being in your presence. That's what happens when you stop trying to do everything and finally commit to doing the right thing. When you finally realize that doing what matters most is not a slogan, but a survival code. The way you navigate the world flips. You no longer measure your day by how many boxes you tick, but by how deeply a single action moves the needle of your life. You stop worship scrolling productivity gurus who sell hustle as holiness, and you start building your own quiet cathedral of focus. You wake up and ask one ruthless question: if I could only pour my soul into 3 things today, what would actually count? Everything else becomes background noise. Messages can wait. Meetings can shrink. Multitasking becomes a myth you no longer believe in, because you've tasted the purity of single-task intensity. And in that intensity, you discover time stretches. Minutes feel wider because you're no longer leaking attention in 1,000 directions. One project, one breath, one decision. Your entire being aimed like a laser instead of sprayed like confetti. The world will call you minimalist, extreme, even selfish, because saying yes to the vital means saying no to their convenience. They'll tempt you with FOMO, with urgent but trivial tasks, with shiny new goals that don't belong to your vision. But you've learned that fear of missing out is really fear of meaninglessness in disguise. You refuse to trade depth for distraction, so you set boundaries that feel like brick walls to outsiders, but feel like breathing space to you. You calendar guardrails. No email before creative work. No quick calls that cost an hour. No endless group chats that masquerade as collaboration. You teach people how to treat your time by how fiercely you protect it. And as those boundaries take root, something remarkable happens. Clarity compounds. The fewer commitments you juggle, the more mastery you bring to each. Your craft sharpens, your relationships deepen, your health stabilizes. You're no longer sprinting on fumes, you're sprinting on purpose. And purpose fuels you longer than caffeine ever could. You notice the myth of balance dissolves. Instead, you build harmony. Harmony means letting seasons exist. There are sprints and there are slow mornings. There is creation and there is recovery. But every phase is chosen, not imposed. You become fluent in the power of deliberate neglect. Tasks left undone on purpose so that the essential can breathe. You don't apologize for the emails unanswered, the parties skipped, the opportunities declined. You know every no is a louder yes to what matters. You watch your mind shift from scattered anxiety to sharp certainty. Indecision fades because priorities speak louder than possibilities. Decision fatigue evaporates when the default answer is, does this feed my mission? And if it doesn't, it's a quick pass. Critics will accuse you of tunnel vision, but tunnels lead somewhere while open plains can lure you into aimless wandering. Your life becomes a straight-line arrow, and arrows are meant to pierce. You pierce mediocrity, pierce distraction, pierce the fear that once said, but what if you drop something important? You've learned the greater tragedy is dropping yourself. So you let the plates fall. You simplify your digital life. One inbox, one note system, one metric of success. You simplify your mental life, one mantra, essential or exit. You simplify your emotional life, one guiding law. If it costs my peace, it's too expensive. And simplicity becomes your silent superpower. People wonder how you keep producing quality while looking rested, how you say no without guilt, how you stay calm while deadlines scream. They don't see the daily discipline of pruning. They don't see the internal audit you run every night. What mattered, what didn't, what gets cut tomorrow. They see results, but they don't witness the relentless editing that freedom requires. You've accepted that excellence is subtraction before it is addition. That legacy is built on a foundation, not a pile. And piles are what happen when you accumulate without curating. So you curate everything, your commitments, your inputs, your circle. You trade quantity for resonance. You'd rather read one potent book deeply than skim 50 summaries shallowly. You'd rather nurture one authentic friendship than gather 100 surface contacts. You'd rather ship one significant project than scatter half-finished ideas across your desktop. And the paradox reveals itself. By doing less, you become more. More grounded, more credible, more impactful, more alive. Because life isn't a marathon of tasks, it's a masterpiece of intention. And masterpieces are not painted with frantic brushstrokes. They are crafted with patient, precise strokes that serve the vision. Your vision is clear now. Do what matters most. Let the rest combust in the friction of your refusal. And when the world tries to shove its urgency back onto your shoulders, you'll smile, breathe, and aim your arrow again. Straight, simple, unstoppable. You weren't born to scatter. You weren't born to spend your days spinning in circles, trying to outrun the chaos you created by saying yes to everything. You were born to move with precision, to walk through this life with clarity, not confusion, to build something that lasts, not just something that keeps you busy. And now, finally, you see it. The goal was never to do it all. The goal was never to impress everyone. The goal was to become so anchored in your purpose that everything outside of it becomes irrelevant. You don't owe your time to every opportunity. You don't owe your energy to every voice. You don't owe your presence to every room. Your life is not an open buffet where anyone can come and take what they want. Your life is a masterpiece in the making, and masterpieces are not rushed. They're not cluttered. They're intentional. They're deliberate. They're clear. So stop being proud of your exhaustion. Stop chasing more like it will finally make you enough. You were already enough before the busyness, before the titles, before the metrics. What you need now is not to speed up, but to strip back. Peel away the layers of distraction, the noise, the clutter, the pressure. Let go of the habits that keep you trapped in cycles of shallow productivity. Let go of the belief that your value comes from how many things you can juggle before you drop. Let go of the guilt that creeps in when you choose rest, because rest is not weakness. Simplicity is not laziness. Focus is not limitation, it's liberation. When you focus, you multiply. When you focus, you honor your future. When you focus, you become a force no chaos can shake. People will ask, how do you make it look so effortless? And you'll smile because you know the truth. Effortlessness is not about doing less work. It's about doing the right work. It's about pouring your energy into one thing that matters instead of 50 things that don't. It's about doing fewer things better, deeper, stronger, with conviction, with soul. And that's when something shifts. You no longer look at your schedule and see pressure. You see power. You no longer view your calendar as a cage. You see it as a canvas, and every decision becomes a brushstroke. You choose what stays. You choose what goes. You choose what gets your energy. And that choice, that quiet, firm, unapologetic choice, is what separates the distracted from the unstoppable. Because in the end, it's not about how much you did. It's about whether you did what mattered. It's about whether you built something real, something you could be proud of, something that outlives noise, outlasts trends, and outshines every moment of doubt you ever had about your worth. So today, don't do more. Do what matters most. Do it fully. Do it without guilt. Do it like your future depends on it, because it does. And watch how everything changes, not because the world slowed down, but because you finally did. You slowed down to realign. You slowed down to rebuild. You slowed down to rise. And that's where your true momentum begins. Not in the blur of constant movement, but in the stillness of intentionality. That is where your power lives. That is where your clarity awakens. That is where your life, your real life, starts to unfold.